Welcome back. So, you've probably been there, right? Staring at some hosting comparison chart, you see things like uh, 4 vCPUs, 8 GB RAM, maybe NVMe storage, and you're just trying to figure out what it all means for your actual website. It can feel like you need some kind of, I don't know, engineering degree just to get
Of
started.
course you don't.
Well, that's exactly what we're getting into in this deep dive. We're looking at virtual private servers, VPS hosting, and trying to, well, simplify that whole selection process.
Yeah, cut through the jargon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the sources we looked at, they weren't just, basic articles. We had technical breakdowns, benchmark reports, the real detailed stuff. And our mission here is really to pull out the critical bits, the things that tell you how to match those tech specs to your site's actual traffic and what it does.
Mm-hmm.
We want to give you that shortcut, skip the acronym soup and focus on the decisions that actually save you time and money.
And that's so important because just hearing get more RAM isn't really helpful when you're looking at 10 different plans. What we're aiming for is to distill the core decision points based on what you need right now operationally, and just as importantly, what you expect for the future, scalability.
Right.
So if you are launching a new site or maybe thinking about migrating an existing one, this framework should hopefully give you some immediate clarity.
Okay, let's unpack that then. Starting right at the foundation.
Yeah.
The most fundamental thing, it seems, from all our sources is defining your traffic level, your tier, and then matching the resources. But crucially, not just matching them randomly, you have to prioritize based on what your site actually does.
Absolutely. You've got the basic 4 resources, right? CPU cores, RAM, storage, and bandwidth. But here's the interesting insight from the deep dive. For most typical web applications, think WordPress, maybe Drupal, basic SaaS platforms, the source is really pushed prioritizing RAM and storage speed, maybe more than just chasing a high CPU core count. Huh.
Oh, that is interesting. I think I always sort of assumed CPU was the main engine. The faster, the better. Was I wrong to fixate on that?
In a virtual server world, yeah, often you are. CPU cores, they handle the raw calculations, sure. But performance bottlenecks, they usually happen when the server is just waiting, waiting for data. So if you have a site with a lot of traffic, especially one hitting a database hard, like a popular forum or definitely an e-commerce store,
Right.
your speed comes down to efficient caching and how fast you can access data. And that means RAM. Think of it like super fast counter space for quick tasks and the actual speed of your storage drive.
Yeah.
The sources really hammered this point about NVMe storage. It's become almost standard now for a reason. Storage speed isn't just about gigabytes anymore. It's measured in IOPS input-output operations per second.
IOPS.
Okay, yeah. If you're running, say, an e-commerce site, slow IOPS will absolutely kill your checkout process. It freezes transactions. And that happens long before you run out of actual storage space, You need high IOPS for those quick database lookups.
That really makes the jargon practical. IOPS for database-heavy sites.
Got it. So what about the other end? If we're just a small blog, maybe a brand new informational site, what's our minimum baseline look like according to these sources?
For that kind of basic low-traffic site, the consensus seemed to be around 2 GB of dedicated RAM and maybe 1 to 2 dedicated CPU cores. That's a stable starting point.
Yeah.
But importantly, that assumes pretty minimal simultaneous users, maybe just a few hundred unique visitors a day, something like that. The key there is not overwhelming the single-core database processes that often come with simpler setups.
Okay, so 2 gigs RAM, 2 cores for starters. But the second things scale up, particularly if the site involves user interaction. Those ratios change quite a bit.
Oh, dramatically, yeah. Once you hit what you might call moderate to high traffic, let's say maybe 20,000 unique monthly visitors, or you're running a complex learning management system or a big portfolio site.
The sources recommend a pretty significant jump in RAM. We're talking 4 GB, maybe 8 GB minimum. And the insight there for sites using common platforms like WordPress was that you should probably allocate at least 2 GB of RAM just for optimizing things like PHP processes and database caching. That buffer lets the site handle sudden traffic spikes without, well, falling over.
Right, avoids those crashes. Okay, and bandwidth. That's the one metric that always seems a bit fuzzy to me. It's not purely speed, is it?
That's an excellent point. It's often confused with connection speed. But in hosting terms, bandwidth is really the volume of data your server is allowed to send out to your visitors over a given period, usually a month.
The volume. Okay.
Exactly. So if your site has large files like high-res photos for a portfolio, or maybe embedded videos, you can burn through that monthly volume limit really fast. That happens even if the page itself loads quickly initially.
So you need to estimate usage.
You do. Calculate your average page size, multiply by your estimated monthly visitors. And the sources strongly suggested always over budgeting bandwidth. Add at least 20% extra if you serve anything more than just simple text.
That kind of detail is exactly what makes this useful. Okay, so once we've sort of figured out our tier, are we RAM-heavy database users or bandwidth-heavy media sharers?
Right.
We get to the second big decision point. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, because it's this trade-off between time, security, and how much technical control you want.
That's the classic fork in the road, isn't it? Managed versus unmanaged VPS. And this isn't just about the price tag. It's really about your human resources, your time, and
Yeah.
your tolerance for risk.
Okay, break that down. Managed first.
Right. If you go for a managed plan, basically you're buying time. The convenience factor is huge because the hosting provider handles the server upkeep. Things like automatic kernel updates, security patching, basic firewall configuration. They usually include some level of integrated security too.
So less work for you.
Much less. For someone listening who doesn't have a dedicated sysadmin or maybe just wants to focus entirely on their content or business, managed is often the clear choice.
But that convenience, it comes at a cost beyond just the monthly fee, doesn't it? The sources mention convenience, sure, but isn't the real trade-off sometimes a kind of vendor lock-in or inflexibility? Like when the provider manages everything, do you lose the ability to install maybe niche software or make highly custom tweaks later on? Did the research touch on how you'd get out of that if you outgrow the managed setup?
That's a really sharp point, and yes, the sources definitely confirm that's a valid concern. The trade-off is often control over the deeper parts of the operating system. A managed environment, for security reasons, usually restricts certain root-level access. So if you suddenly need a very specific, maybe uncommon version of PHP, or you want to implement a highly unique caching setup,
The managed plan might just say no.
it might. You could find yourself kind of locked into their standard way of doing things, their stack, and escaping that. It usually means migrating your entire site and setup to a new, probably unmanaged VPS, which, let's be honest, the provider isn't likely to make super easy for you.
Right. Okay. Which brings us neatly to the other side, the unmanaged plan.
Yeah.
This is the control option, maximum freedom.
Precisely. If you are a seasoned developer, or maybe you have a system admin on your team, unmanaged plans give you almost complete customization. You can fine-tune the server kernel, you can adjust caching layers exactly how you want them, optimize the whole environment for your specific needs.
But there's always a but.
There is. And it's a big one. The sources highlighted something pretty stark here. The security burden is entirely 100% on you. One of the most striking things we came across was a case study. Mid-sized company chose unmanaged. Staff changes happened, things slipped. They failed to update their server kernel and apply security patches for about 6 months.
Oof. I can see where this is going.
Yeah. The resulting data breach was massive and entirely preventable, cost them tens of thousands, months of lost business. So choosing unmanaged just because it looks cheaper on paper, that can be a huge liability if you don't have really solid internal processes and expertise to back it up.
Wow. So the why behind choosing managed or unmanaged really comes down to a hard, honest look at your team's actual technical skills and time available. It's a calculation,
Yeah.
isn't it? Risk versus time. If you spend, say, 5 hours a month wrestling with an unmanaged server, maybe those 5 hours are actually costing your business more in lost productivity than the extra fee for a managed plan would.
Exactly that calculation.
Okay, so we've covered the immediate stuff, the hardware resources, the management style, but what the sources really seemed to emphasize next was looking beyond today. You have to plan for success, right? Which means thinking about the long view, scalability.
Yes. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is arguably what separates a decent hosting provider from a really great one. You absolutely must choose a platform that offers easy, preferably elastic scalability.
Easy and elastic. What does that mean in practice?
Well, the core requirement isn't just that they can upgrade your plan, it's that they can do it smoothly, fluidly. True scalability, the kind you want, means their underlying infrastructure uses modern cloud or virtualization tech. Technologies that let you add resources, more RAM, more CPU, more storage seamlessly, ideally with minimal or even zero downtime. We should be talking minutes to upgrade, not hours or worse, multi-day migration projects.
Okay, so if a provider says scaling up involves them having to physically move your entire setup to a different server box, that's a bit of a red flag, even if they call it an easy upgrade path.
That's a huge red flag, exactly. It suggests an older, maybe less flexible hardware setup. Good scalability today means resources are drawn from a flexible pool. The sources really stress this. Ask potential providers specifically about their virtualization technology. You're looking for providers using systems that allow for scaling, adding, or sometimes even removing resources without needing a complex manual migration. This ensures that as your site or business grows, your hosting doesn't suddenly become this bottleneck, this ceiling that holds you back. That ease of growth is just fundamental for long-term success.
That's a really powerful, concrete takeaway. Okay.
Yeah.
So to sort of bring this all together for you, the listener, we've basically distilled these sources down into three, let's call them pillars, for choosing a VPS. First, the prioritized resource match. Really think about RAM and IOPS based on what your site does. Don't just chase CPU cores.
Right.
Second, the management style assessment. Be honest about your time, your tech skills, and your comfort with risk, managed or unmanaged.
Crucial choice.
And finally, elastic scalability. Make sure your provider's tech allows for smooth, frictionless growth down the line.
And to maybe synthesize those key takeaways even further, your very first step is really understanding that critical link between the resources, CPU, RAM, storage, bandwidth, and what your website actually does. Are you a memory-hungry platform needing that 8 GB minimum? Or do you have high IOPS demands needing fast NVMe storage for database work? Get that functional allocation right first, even before you seriously look at the price tag.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Well, hopefully it means you now have a clearer, more actionable roadmap. You've got specific technical questions you can now ask any potential hosting provider. You know which metrics probably matter most for your situation. And maybe you can spot the difference between generic marketing fluff and actual performance indicators.
Absolutely. And thinking about all this, especially the scalability part, raises one last important question. Something for you to maybe mull over as you're trying to balance cost versus performance. We established that high traffic sites need powerful setups, right? And that easy scalability is vital for upgrading up. But what if you overestimate? What if you pick a really powerful, maybe expensive plan right from the start, expecting huge traffic?
And the traffic doesn't quite materialize that fast.
Exactly. How might that initial decision impact your ability to easily scale down later? Even if the provider promised easy scalability for upgrades, does their architecture, the system that allows quick scaling up, also allow equally easy scaling down? Or are you locked into that higher cost? That's definitely something worth investigating before you sign any long-term contract. Can you right-size downwards just as easily as upwards?
That's a fantastic point, ensuring you can adjust for efficiency, not just for growth. A perfect reflective thought to end on for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us. We really hope this framework makes your next hosting decision feel significantly less confusing and a lot more straightforward. Until next time.